Hey everybody, this is Dream, and this is the FanDuel main slate top picks from me. So I wanted to make a quick announcement at the beginning of this. I created a Patreon because I had a couple people ask me about it, and so the link is down in the description. And I have two perks to come along with this. First of all, I will shout you out at the end of each video. Second of all, I will actually put my breakdown that I utilize to make that I make up. It's basically a little spreadsheet, but I'll just copy and paste it over to Patreon each time I make it up for the video so that everybody can read what I've written down, not just what I've said in the video. A lot of times it's very similar, but you'll have an extra spot where you can re-look at it if you're on Patreon. So you'll also get the little blurb that I have for every picture of the slate. Usually it's like a half a sentence or a sentence long. That's true for each player. I just put a little blurb about what it is that I like about the player, basically. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get into the slate. There's 12 games today. And so let me get into that. So overall, we have quite a few teams, actually, that are in kind of really good spots for hitting. My favorite team is Milwaukee. They're going against Chad Cole of Colorado in Colorado, and I think the spread on that game, I think it's like 10 or 11 runs, and Milwaukee's projected to get like 7 at least. That's just going to be a really nice, that's going to be a great matchup for Milwaukee. They're also hitting the ball pretty well, and he's a really not good pitcher. Even on the road, he's not that good. So I suspect that Milwaukee's going to have a big game. Now, if you want to like real crazy thing and you want to slide him into that, that starting position here, you could potentially take down a GPP if he like decides to have the game of his life. But I just don't expect anything from him in this particular matchup. I imagine Colorado's going to go to the bullpen, who's pretty weak as well. So he's somebody I really want to target. So that's Milwaukee. Then a couple other teams that look really good. St. Louis looks really solid. Houston is going against Glenn Otto, is always a nice guy to go up against. And then Toronto is going against Kyle Bradish, who's just not been good as of late. One other team that I'd mention would be the LA Angels against Eduardo Rodriguez. He has not been very good, but even if he is, he usually doesn't last very long in the game. So they have some good upside, with the Trouts and the Tanis and stuff. So without further ado, I'll get into the 3 pitchers for FanDuel that I think are guys that you should choose from. Probably I'm going to put these in the order that I think that they're ideal. And so, let me just get into that. So my first favorite option is Shane Bieber. Now, he's been a little hit or miss when it comes to wins and losses. But as you can see, he's still getting in the 40s and 50s most games. And he has the best matchup against Kansas City. He's pitched really well, and he has the greatest upside in this matchup on this entire slate. I just like him overall to be the best pitcher available, and he's got high strikeout potential, so we definitely like that as well. My second favorite is Garrett Cole for the Yankees. At some point, the Yankees are going to start playing good. Garrett Cole's been good. He's had some off games, but for the most part, he's been good. He is going against Minnesota, which isn't the most ideal matchup, but it's the second best in the Vegas odds, and also the top K potential rating on the board, which makes him one of the best players available. And then the third guy that I think is really solid today is Kyle Wright. Now, his only risk is the fact that the strikeouts don't always happen, but he's still getting the upside and the points on the other end because he does manage to stay in the game for quite a while. And he doesn't really give up too many runs, and he's been getting lots of wins because the Braves have been rolling well. So I think he's got some pretty good upside against Oakland, who's just not very good. So he's pretty much the third best of these. Now, you might say, well, what about Valdez or Musgrove or Woodruff? It's just matchup situations that make them a little bit hit or miss, and so it's a little bit harder to consider using those guys. Brendan Woodruff is playing against Colorado in Colorado, which just makes it super risky, even though it's a good matchup for him. Everybody else is kind of hit or miss, and so there's not too much to say about them when it comes to starting here. I think if you choose between Cole, Beaver, or Kyle Wright, you're likely to have a good chance of having the top pitcher on the slate. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into the catchers and first baseman. And so what I've done here is I've broken them down. I've got 5 top options and 5 cheap alternates. trying to include some more cheap alternates because obviously, let's say that we put in a picture here of Mr. Beaver. We're going to have $3,000 worth of a player to work with. And so pretty much, you want to have some good options under that $3,000 range each day so that you can, get some of the more expensive guys in the lineups. One thing I like about FanDuel's pricing is they don't really go way high like DraftKings does. They'll have like $6,000 guys when they're on hot. Like some of the highest priced guys on FanDuel are like 4,200, 4,500, give or take. Like Freddie Freeman today is 4,000, and Vlad Jr. is 4,100. So those are like those are pretty inexpensive comparatively, and you can usually fit them in if you got some decent, $3,000 $2,500 options. So not that you're going to be able to fit in a bunch of $4,000 guys, but you could fit one or two potentially if you can work if we work the other guys right. So I've got good value options at each position. There's plenty of value today, and so it's just a matter of picking who you like the most. So at this position, my top overall option is going to be Talese for Milwaukee. Obviously, in Milwaukee against Colorado. Now, he is extremely boom or bust, but in this matchup, he seems like a pretty boom potential option, especially against a terrible pitcher. Then the next guy that I like is Vlad Jr. He's in a really good matchup against Baltimore. His team is also pretty stackable, and I think he's probably my top play of the day. It's just going to be, it'll be a little bit harder to roster him at the 4,100 price range, depending on who else you like, but he's still pretty decent. Then if you want to pay for his teammate, Mr. Kirk, he wouldn't be a bad option today. He's been hitting the ball pretty well when he does play. He's taken a few games off here and there, and he's had some bad games, but his price point is pretty reasonable for the situation, and he's in a plus matchup. And then I have two more top tier options. Freddie Freeman is one of them. He just hit a home run today, actually, a little while ago. He's been hitting the ball pretty well. He's a little bit boomer bust as of late, but he'd been better earlier in the season. But he still has high potential, and in a very plus matchup, he's not a bad option. And then my final one is Matt Olson. Matt Olson has been hitting the ball kind of hit and miss as of late, but he definitely has home run potential and double potential, and Atlanta's been scoring the ball really well against bad pitching, especially, and he's going up against a below-average pitcher at Oakland, and so we look for him to have a good shot. Not only that, but this is kind of like a coming back to Oakland for the first time game, and so we'd like to see him, have some big games in this series. And then for my cheaper options, I have 5 guys here at this position. Omar Narvaez for Milwaukee and a plus matchup in Colorado. Obviously, he's kind of a boomer bust situation, but he has the potential to hit home runs. And even though he hadn't hit a ton this season, he still has some potential in a game like this. Then my next guy is Wilmer Flores. Now, this guy has first, second, and third base potential as well, so you could mix him around. He's not in the super ideal matchup, but he has been hitting the ball pretty well as of late, and so I think he's a pretty decent option to take a look at if you need to save some money. At one of those positions, you can use him anywhere. The next guy I like is Adley Rutschman. He's been hitting the ball pretty well all season since he came up, and as you can see, he has some high scoring potential, and he does have home run potential. So he's been getting 6 to 9 fantasy points a lot, but if he can break out, then he'll definitely pay off. But even if he got 9 points, he's a good option for you in that perspective. I have 2 more guys here. One of them is Ryan Mountcastle. Now he's in a boomer bust situation, and I'm going to call him an extreme boomer bust situation because he really doesn't get much hits unless he actually hits like a home run and gets a bunch of RBIs or something. He's really just boomer bust. Like he'll have a really big game and with in between a whole bunch of really subpar ones. So I think he's somebody that's in a good matchup where he can definitely make it happen, but you still have to be a little bit careful. Now he's going against. So I wanted to clarify about Toronto. They're going against Mitchell White. For Baltimore, they're going against Mitchell White. Mitchell White has always been a player this season that I see all the write-ups are like, oh man, he's going to be so good. He's going to be so good. He has one win all season, and that wasn't a game he started. He started 15 games. I don't understand. Like his metrics don't look that great. I mean, they look okay, but like he has no wins as a starter, and uh, he doesn't really do that. I mean, he does decent, but it's just not like I don't know. He doesn't go that deep in the games a lot of times. Just not somebody that I think is. Um, I just think he's pretty overrated for what for the quality of. Like look at all these 4 inning, 5 innings, 4 innings. Like he just doesn't get very far in these games. I don't understand why everybody thinks he's great, and I like to use guys against him, and I usually do pretty good as a result of it. So anyway, the last guy that I have at the catcher slash first base is Trey Mancini. Now he's another guy that's in a boomer bust situation, though he does have some good games, mixed in there. He has finally started to get some hits. The last a few games ago, he had a slump there for a while where he just really didn't get any hits. Was batting like 100, but he's starting to get going again. Hopefully, he can get a hit a home run in a couple games this week. And I think that this is a situation where he's at least pretty viable to do that. So let's go ahead and get in the second base, guys. My favorite option is Colton Wong. Sorry. The Milwaukee-Colorado matchup is just so juicy for him. He's been hitting the ball pretty well lately. He hadn't been playing every game, as you can see, like this Arizona game, and there's a couple others down below. But he's been hitting the ball well, and I like what he's doing. If you look at his last 10, he's averaging 10 fantasy points a game. If he can hit a home run, he'll be somebody that's going to pay off bigly. So then we got Marcus Semien for Texas against Houston. It's not an ideal matchup for him, but he's been really hitting the ball well as of late. You can see that he's got a lot of really good games. Jonathan India for Cincinnati is the next guy I like. Now you do have to take a look to see if he's gonna be fine from the injury, but I think he should be okay, and he'll probably get back in here. And he's been hitting the ball extremely well, and he's in a nice little matchup against the Cubs. Then we have Mr. Altuve. He's my final top option at second base, and he is just absolutely killing the ball lately, which is Altuve. I mean, and they score runs, and he gets RBIs, so he's just been hitting the ball great, and so we like to. I mean, 17.65 fantasy points a game last 10. He's 4,100. Like he's probably my top 4,100 guy, other than Vlad Jr. So if you can fit a 4,100 guy in, you definitely want to pick between those two. And then for my cheap alternates, Kevin Biggio for Toronto. Sorry, it's Biggio, I think. He has surprisingly been pretty good lately, and so I was previously not going to put him in here, but you can see that he's had several good games in the last 6 games. I believe he's what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games over 9 in the last 6, and he's got hits in all those. He's actually got a hit streak of 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 games, or 6 games. Sorry. So yeah, I mean he seems pretty decent. Then another guy that you might want to look at is Andres Gimenez for Cleveland against Kansas City. He's been hitting the ball pretty well as of late too. Sorry, I hit the wrong button. He's not gonna like blow you out of the water, but he could save you some money. And so if that's what you need, then he might be a pretty decent option. Just not a real flashy scorer kind of guy, if that makes sense. So anyway, that's second base. So let's go ahead and get into third base. My top options, I have 5 of them and then 3 cheaper guys. So Matt Chapman is the first guy that we're going to take a look at. He's been pretty good as of late. He's just in a plus matchup with Toronto, and he's stackable, and he's cheap enough where that stack can really pay off for you. Then the next guy I really like, and I liked him yesterday, but he didn't play, is Justin Turner. He was out of the lineup for some reason, which he has been absolutely tearing the ball up. Look at these scores. He's only had really one bad game in the last 10 or so games. So let's see, 9 of the last 13 games, he's over 12 fantasy points. That's just incredible. I think he's a great option if he starts tomorrow for the Dodgers. Then I have Alex Bregman, who is actually kind of priced down a little bit. He's been hitting the ball pretty well. It's a pretty good matchup for him, and I think he's a pretty decent option. You know, he's got a little bit of a boomer bust situation going, which is dropped his price a little bit. But overall, I think he's a pretty good option in this plus matchup. And then, of course, Manny Machado. Now, he's probably going to be difficult to fit him in the lineup, but it's hard to argue with his results lately. He's been hitting the ball really well, and he has massive point upside if he can get like a 2-home run game or something. And he is a good matchup. I definitely like him against the pitcher he's going up against, which is Merrill Kelly. Now, Merrill Kelly is a decent pitcher sometimes, but he hasn't been perfect as of late. So that was the second base top option, or sorry, third base top options. Well, I actually have one more. It's Mr. Riley from Atlanta. Now, he had 4 home runs in the last 5 games, as you can see. In Atlanta, you know, he seems to do pretty good most of the time because Atlanta, when they score runs, then he's a lot of the reason why. And so, I mean, their whole team scores well, but he's usually in the mix somewhere in there. And they usually get lots of RBIs and stuff on 2-out hits and stuff like that. So I definitely like him as an option. Now, obviously, he's a little bit expensive, but I still think he's a pretty good option if you can afford him. Then I have 3 cheap alternates at this position, at third base, excuse me. The first is Kevin Biggio, who I already talked about. The next guy is Jace Peterson from Milwaukee. If you can, you know, obviously we're limited on how many guys from a particular team we can put in the matchup, but if you can fit him, then he's in a pretty decent situation. He's been a little hit or miss lately, but he does have the upside to get like a couple home runs here and there. As you can see, he's had some good games in the past. So it's just a matter of the right matchups, and it's in a good matchup for him. And then the final guy is Josh Rojas. Now, he is in a tough pitcher situation, but he has been good against pitchers like Musgrave. So I think he's somebody that you have to at least consider a little bit. His price is pretty cheap for his production value. So that's what I have at third base. And then at shortstop, I have 3 top options and 2 lower level guys. It was hard to find a lot good here at this position. But Willie Adames is the first guy. He's just in a nice little plus matchup, you know, against Colorado. He's probably my least favorite main starter against Colorado today, simply because of his price and stuff. But you just want to fit whoever you can from this team into your lineup the best you can. Then the next guy is Trey Turner, who kind of surprisingly has been kind of boomer bust as of late, but he's been okay, and he's in a plus matchup here, so we think of it. He looks like a guy that you could potentially rely on. And then finally, Dansby Swanson. Now, he's not been quite hitting the ball as well as he had been earlier in the season, but he's still getting a lot of quality games, and so he's somebody to take a look at as an option. And then my 2 cheap options here are Jeremy Pena from Houston, and a nice plus matchup against Glenn Otto, obviously. He hasn't been hitting the ball particularly well, but all it takes is just a really big game, and you know that he can have it. He's been a little slumpy off and on as of late, so he's a little bit risky, but he's somebody you can look at as an option. And then Gunnar Henderson. Now, this guy came into the league on fire. Why does it have the last game twice here? That's weird. Anyway, he's had some good games. He has home run potential. He hits the ball pretty well. He really doesn't strike out. He's only struck out 1 time this season. You gotta ignore this like weird thing that's happened here. But he's really only had 1 game where he didn't do good at all. Obviously, Baltimore is kind of hit or miss some games, but they are vying for a spot. I think he's not super safe on FanDuel because he's, you know, you gotta get RBIs and stuff, and Baltimore does struggles with that sometimes. But he's cheap, and he's somebody that you can take a look at. And then finally, for the outfielders, keep in mind you can put, you know, an extra player in the utility spot on FanDuel, so that helps, and you only need the 1 pitcher. So obviously, you can only put fielders into the utility. So outfielders, second, shortstop, third base, second base, and then catcher, first base. But if you like two of the first basemen quite a bit, you can stick one of them in that utility spot and help you. All right, so basically I have quite a few guys listed for outfield. I got I think six top options, and then what 5 cheap alternates, and then I also have 2 Hail Mary options for you, just in general, that you could utilize as if you really wanted to, that are super inexpensive, like at the bottom of the barrel expensive. So let's go ahead and get into the top ones. So first of all, I have Christian Yelich. He's been hitting the ball really well, and he's in that great matchup against Colorado, as we know. 11.57 fantasy points a game. Overall, his production is sometimes a little bit hit or miss, but in this matchup where he's got the, Colorado, I really like him, and he's been pretty good lately, so I think he's a good option. Not too expensive either. Kyle Tucker, he's been really kind of boomer bust lately, but he's still got some upside in this matchup, and his price has come down some, and so I definitely like him as an option in this particular situation. George Springer is somebody that I like here. Obviously, a little bit more expensive, but for Toronto, if you're trying to get that Toronto stack, he's somebody you might want to look at. He's extremely boomer bust as of late, but in the past he's been really good day to day, and I think he can get back on track against Baltimore. Cedric Mullins is my next option. Now he seems actually a little bit too cheap for what he's been doing lately. Obviously he's kind of, we need him to get a home run if he's really going to pay off, but his price point gives him a lot of leverage, so that if he scores like 9 or 10 points, you can feel okay about it. Then Riley Green, surprisingly more expensive than Cedric is, but he's still a pretty good option. He's been hitting the ball pretty good. Now, the last couple games, he's had 3 points a game, but before that, he's been rocking and stuff. So I think he's still in a good position to continue to do well, and he's got a pretty decent matchup. And then finally, or actually 2 more guys here. Juan Soto against Arizona. Not obviously the greatest matchup against Merrill Kelly, but he's also just Juan Soto in a plus matchup. When it comes to bat-wise and stuff like that, Merrill Kelly's not good against guys like Soto. And then Toscar, I think that's how you say it, Toscar Hernandez for Toronto. If you're trying to do the Toronto stack, he's going to be somebody you definitely want in your lineup. He's been hitting the ball pretty solidly, and he's a good player, and I definitely like him in this matchup. I also consider Yordan Alvarez to be a good option as well, but he's also $4,000. So let's go ahead and get the cheap guys. Andrew McCutchen is the first guy I'm going to look at. Now, he hasn't been hitting the ball very well, but this is the type of situation where he could. And as you can see today, he actually did hit a home run, or not a home run, but he had 2 hits and 2 runs scored. So I think he's in a pretty good position to continue to do well against Colorado. But he hasn't been great lately, so he's almost Hail Mary-ish. Profar for San Diego, he's been actually somebody I've really liked as of late. He does it seems like almost every other game. Now today he had 12 fantasy points, so he did pretty good. But if you look at his scores, it's like every other day. So technically today would be the good day because yesterday was supposed to be the bad one, but he still ended up doing okay. But as you can see, he's getting a lot of the RBIs in these every other game situations, which is weird. His points are weird. It's funny how that happens with some guys. Then Taylor Ward is somebody that I think is in a good situation for LA Angels. Now, he has not been hitting the ball particularly well, but he's having some boom or bust type of games, and so I think he's somebody that you can take a look at. Eloy Jimenez for Chicago White Sox is kind of in a similar situation as Ward. He's more of an extreme boomer bust kind of situation. As you can tell, he can, why I say extreme, because he can score 30 points when he feels like it, but he's just been really hit and miss. And then Seiyu Suzuki for the Cubs. He's not going to do anything flashy, but he's in a plus matchup, and he could have a decent game in this particular situation. Then I have 2 Hail Mary options, just absolute Hail Marys. Rafael Ortega, he's not a flashy player either, but he does tend to have some. He's put together stretches of games where he'll get really solid scoring. So he's somebody you could potentially put there. And then my favorite Hail Mary, Kerry Carpenter for Detroit Tigers. He's been very boomer bust, like extreme boomer bust, in fact. But if he plays and he's got a decent matchup for himself against Mike Mayers, so I think he's in a kind of a Hail Mary situation. So that's pretty much what I have for this matchup. I want to say thank you again for all the people that are watching and liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them down below. Shout out to the Patreon subscriber, Gerald P. If you feel like joining Patreon, I will have the information that I stated in this video and stuff there as well. So thanks again, and have a nice day, guys.